Python is a unique language because it doesn't care about things like curly braces. So in JavaScript, you have something that looks like this, a function, thing, parentheses, and then curly braces. And then we can have some sort of indenting in here, or we don't have to have any indenting and we can just write this. That works too. But we're not writing JavaScript, we are writing Python. And in Python, we use indentation. So a thing like a variable, like course, is equal to Python 101. And then to create another variable, we just put it on another line. We don't have to worry about a semicolon or declaring multiple variables at once like we do in JavaScript or any other language. We simply do name is equal to Caleb Tallien. And if you wanted to, you could always follow me at Caleb Tallien on Twitter. Let's do that, in fact. Let's do Twitter at Caleb Tallien. And then for another variable, we simply do, the variable name is equal to, and then some stuff in here. Now, when it comes to things like functions, which we'll talk about near the end of this course, or when we talk about things like conditional statements, which is in the middle of this course, we're going to see things like if something is equal to something else, colon, and then we have our code in here. And what's nice about this is we don't need all those curly braces. We don't have to get lost in where all the curly braces are. We simply use a colon. And that tells Python that the next line is supposed to be indented. Now you can indent any way you want as long as it's consistent. So if you have 1 space, that's fine. 2 spaces, 3 spaces, 4 spaces, 68 spaces, you could do anything you like. But typically we stick with tabs or 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see those tiny little dots in there. That's 4 spaces. I usually just hit tab and that works. Now, in other programming languages, if you have any programming experience in another language, typically we can get away with writing nothing in here. And that's fine. We can stub out some code that way. But that's not going to work in Python. In Python, if we have no code inside of here, we simply type pass. But all our code can go in here. And then when we want to get out of this if statement, we simply delete that tab and we go back to the leftmost line here. And then we could say something like if something else is equal to something else, pass. And this should have a pass as well. So we're looking at something like that, and that's indentation. And so when you indent, you're saying, hey, there's a colon at the end here, make sure you indent. And that's going to execute all this code in here. And if there is no code, we simply type pass, and that just means do nothing. Otherwise, watch this. If we do course is equal to Python 101, and let's get rid of this pass, and let's execute this file, we're going to see an indentation error. So we can do Python indentation.py, that's the file that I made up here before I started this video. And it says file indentation.py line 8, syntax error, unexpected, end of file while parsing. And so it expects more to be down here. What we could do is we could simply say, let's touch this up, we could say pass. And when we do this, we don't see any errors. So if you see a syntax error, chances are it's just indentation. Indentation isn't working. Let's go ahead and do one more example here. Let's delete that pass and let's write another if statement, but this one has a pass. And so this time we're not going to see an unexpected end of file while parsing. Let's go ahead and run this. And this time we see an indentation error. And anytime you see an indentation error, it's definitely indentation error based. And it expected an indented block after line 8. So, I guess this is actually before line 8. So it's saying there's an indentation error on line 8, and it is expecting something up here. So we could type PASS for pass, and we don't see any errors. And so the whole reason I'm making this video is because in other programming languages, we tend to use curly braces. And curly braces, when it opens and closes, says everything inside of the curly braces is going to be part of, our if statement or our function or something like that. In Python, we simply use indentation. Now, what happens if we go ahead and indent course and Twitter? Well, this is expecting something else. And so it gets this weird indentation here automatically. And when we run this, we should see an indentation error as well. And we see indentation error, unexpected indent. And again, all your code should stick to the left as far as possible, unless you have a colon. Whenever you have a colon, you hit tab. If you have another if statement in here, if something, do something else. We could say if something else, colon, do another thing. And so every time you have a colon, you just want to indent. And whenever you want this if block or a function, and again, we'll talk about those in the future, but whenever you want those to not work, or to end rather, not to not work, but to end, you simply unindent. And you go back to, well, in this example, we would go back to our leftmost area. In this example, we would come back out where it says if, so we would write more stuff in here. And to get out of this if statement, all this stuff in here, we simply say, do more stuff in here. And then what's nice about VS Code is we can simply collapse this with these little arrows. And VS Code is it's intelligent enough to know that these are if statements that are being, well, they're trying to be executed, but the syntax itself is suggesting that, for example, only this should be collapsed, like that. And all of this should be collapsed, like that. Now, there's no homework or assignment for this particular lesson. This is simply a conceptual lesson. I want you to know that indentation is very important when it comes to Python.